Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with James Junkin and myself, Dr. Martin. And we're here with our guest today, Steve Sorensen. And we'll be talking about risk as we always do. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce our sponsor. Today's episode of the Risk Matrix, powered by Veriforce, is sponsored by Mariner Golf Consulting and Services. Occupational safety and health policies and procedures represent the foundation of a functioning and executable safety management system. Using a customized approach, Mariner Golf's technical writing group works with your team to develop customized policies and procedures that meet regulatory standards, third-party verification system requirements, such as Veriforce, and industry best practices. Mariner Golf's policies and procedures have withstood hundreds of hiring client audits. To learn more, visit marinergolf.veriforcenetwork.com. Mariner Golf Consulting and Services is led by one of our hosts, James Junkin. Yep. And for
Indeed.
those of you who don't know, this episode is running directly after the ballots came out for the ASSP. So if you're an ASSP member, you should know that our host, James Junkin, and president of Mariner Golf Consulting and Services, he's running for senior vice president. So
I am.
he's I'm not an ASSP, but if I was, he's got my vote. He's a Columbia Southern University graduate. He's in their doctoral program right now. Get out the vote. Vote for James. This is the guy you want to lead your society. This is the guy you want to lead ASSP someday. So I hope I didn't make you blush, James.
You made me blush a little bit, but the election begins March the 1st. I am a candidate for senior vice president, and I really encourage all ASSP members to go over to the ASSP.org website and look at the slate of candidates that are there. A lot of other positions up for election this election cycle. Check out the candidate bios and the platform statements. If you are a member of ASSP on March 1st, you should have received an email from no reply at directvote.net. That may end up in your spam, but that'll be your ballot to vote. It only takes a couple of minutes to vote. This is your society. The society exists for the members. So participation, you get out of it what you put into it, right? So please look for that email. It's coming out from no reply at directvote.net. Look for it in your spam and participate.
Vote for James. Vote for James.
Vote
Senior
for
Vice
somebody.
President. Vote for, he said vote for somebody, but I say vote for James.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, James.
We have a very exciting guest with us today, my good friend, Steve Sorensen, who is the senior HSE specialist at TD Williamson. And I want to congratulate Steve. Steve is one of the nation's, world's newest certified safety professionals from the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. Congratulations, Steve. Dr. Martin and I know your struggle, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Glad to be on.
Well, thank you. And also, Steve is a member of the Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board. And in conversations with Steve, we wanted to invite him on to talk about risk. Most of the time when we talk about risk with safety professionals, we're talking about occupational safety and health risk, right? But risk can come in many forms to an organization, whether they're a hiring client or whether they're a contractor like Steve. And they've gone through an interesting process. We want Steve to come out and talk about it. But, risk can come everything from occupational safety and health to compliance risk, economic risk, risk in an ever-changing marketplace, competition, particularly both at the hiring client level and at the contractor level, having a plan, execution risk. You can have a great idea, but if you can't execute it, right, it's a risk. Strategic risk, operational risk, quality risk, post-incident sometimes, reputational risk. We're seeing that. Dr. Martin, I am shocked. Ever since you and I did the podcast on child labor, it seems like every week we're having a problem in the United States with someone in someone's supply chain given child labor, right? And that's reputational risk. along with compliance risk. And if you work in the international market like Steve does, that, you got international risk. And then we just saw here not too many days ago, AT&T technology risk. If your entire cell phone network was on AT&T, you woke up with silence, right? Silence. Good thing I was on T-Mobile, but my business partner I needed to talk to is on AT&T. Caused us a little problems. Cybersecurity, and we've seen instances to that. So a lot of different types of risk beyond just occupational safety and health risk. So Steve, tell us a little bit about your role at TDW and your journey through all these different risks to formulate a risk matrices that considers everything based on severity and potential.
All right. Thanks for having me again. So, Steve Sorensen, I've been with TDW for almost 16 years. So, I've been in the oil and gas industry for about that long. Just a little bit about my background, just so you know, I started my professional career as an insurance agent, and I did a lot of insurance, selling insurance and stuff, but I figured that it wasn't really for me. I'm more of an educator than I am.
Are you saying, brother,
salesperson.
were we in good hands with Steve or not?
We were in good hands. So part of that, though, is laying the foundation of risk, right? So when I wrote property and casualty insurance, I started to understand what, field underwriting was all about, what risk was all about. So then I moved into semiconductor industry in Silicon Valley, and I was a facilities and safety manager there for a number of years. And when the economy kind of took the downturn in 2008, I decided to get out of that industry, and I got into oil and gas with TD Williamson, more specifically pipeline services contracting. So that's kind of a little bit about me. About TD Williamson and about our journey. I'll say that since I've been here, we started out, I guess, traditionally with the traditional type of looking at risk and so forth. In about 2016, we brought in Todd Conklin. And for those of you who don't know Todd Conklin, he wrote a bunch of books. He has a podcast, and this is a shameless plug for Todd. He did the pre-accident investigation. And so what we did.
Todd, if you can hear us, Todd, send the check to Steve.
So as an organization, we realized that we needed to move forward, right? So we needed something new, and we needed to improve. We're a company that believes in continuous improvement. And so we looked at this, and we decided that part of what the pre-accident investigation is that when something goes wrong, when there's an incident or something happens, we have a tendency to blame the person who triggers the incident, as opposed to looking at all the things that had to fail for that incident to happen. So that was kind of huge in the way that we looked at how to investigate incidents and where we put our energies. Instead of blaming the person who triggers an incident, we decided that we were going to do a better job at investigating the incidents and finding out where we can improve administrative controls, engineering controls, or eliminate or substitute, using the hierarchy of control. So
I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of Conklin and Decker and Reason. And if you're not a safety nerd and you're listening to this podcast, those names may not mean a whole lot to you, but they set the foundation of what is now called the new view of safety, which is transitioning away from a behavioral program where we see the workers as the source of all the problems. So I applaud you for that. But let's talk about it from this standpoint, Steve. I was on a podcast yesterday, and I get in a lot of trouble sometimes for things I say, but safety is pretty simple to me. what are the hazards, what are the risks, and what are the controls. Now, we understand that all three of us are safety professionals, but can you apply that same concept in conjunction with Conklin to all the other risks that we just talked about within your organization? Is that kind of how TDW went about getting beyond just the risk to the organization from occupational safety and health and compliance?
That's correct. We realized that we don't work in silos, right? A lot of our different parts of our organization, they work in silos. And so when we talk about risk, it's a risk to the entire organization. And so we recently went through and updated our incident management system and reclassified risk, but we didn't do it all by ourselves as a HSE team. What we did was we involved all the other players. So we had our quality team involved. We had our sales team involved. We had our financial team involved.
Steve, I want to jump through this thing and hug your neck.
Yeah, so I'm thinking ISO, right? We talk about integrated safety management systems or integrated management systems, and this is the epitome of what we're talking about when we start saying 9,001, 14,001, 45,001, and then integrating all of those things into one, not a silo, right? Into one big happy family where everybody's looking at risk in the same way, right? I care about your risk, you care about my risk, James cares about both of our risks, and it's holistic. It's a holistic approach. Am I getting that wrong or I'm getting it right? Because
No.
I just put my hands in my air and I'm saying hallelujah.
So
yeah, you got it right.
Did you come up with that? How did that work to get that started? Because, you know, people are territorial inside of organizations. I cast no dispersions on TDW. I'm just making that as a general business observation. Y'all are a great company. I've worked with you many, many years. So how did it work to get it started, Steve?
So we had a team of individuals. So if you look at, we had some feedback from our operations groups that if there was an incident somewhere, you know, they just want our operations people to report an incident and then let everyone else, like the safety professionals, the quality professionals, down the line, form an investigation group, go through with the investigation, all that kind of stuff, right? Sometimes what happens when you do incident investigations or when you classify risk and all that kind of stuff is it gets really convoluted up front, right? And, you don't know who does what. We clearly delineated who does what and where do incidents flow? How does this procedure go? And so that's kind of the approach that we took, and it was a collaborative approach, and mainly the quality and HSE teams worked on that.
Okay. How did you obtain buy-in from your senior leadership? Because that sounds to me like a lot of resource allocation from humans. Like it's going to take time and energy and probably, people have day jobs. How did you convince the management team that this is worthwhile?
Well, there were a lot of behind closed doors meetings, I'm assuming, that were at levels higher than what I am. But in general, our company supports continuous improvement and looking for new ways to do things. And so it just kind of fell naturally. We do have like ISO certifications and APIQ certifications and stuff like that. So it isn't anything really new to us. It's just something that we decided internally that we had to get better at. And so, if you do a poor incident investigation and you don't really get to the causal factors or you don't really get to the root causes, most of the time people are reactive, right? They do a really good job at a corrective action, but they don't ever really do a preventative action. So what we're trying to do, or what we did, is we're saying, okay, you know what, we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to understand what could get us in the future, right? What would the impact be to our business in all those areas that we discussed, if something should happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this question. We are all familiar with occupational safety and health and compliance risk. What were some other risk categories that were revealed through this process?
So, you have the basic HSE ones, you have environmental, you have injury and illness, and like vehicle incidents and so forth. But quality or nonconformances, that kind of thing. Property damage. That was one that we had to get right, because that one sometimes it defaults, an incident will default to one of those categories. We had to know what would really be catastrophic for the business, what is negligible, right? So those,
Yeah.
and then, so
That's where you start getting into the definitions, right?
exactly.
And the only way that you can do definitions like that, at least from your perspective, probably in safety, is for somebody to give you a dollar amount, right?
Mhm.
Or a downtime amount. And you can't do that without your other parts of the business involved, right? You can't make those definitions appear. You know what I really found interesting, Steve, is that you said the operational people actually came to the table with the question that, and maybe I got this wrong. What I heard you say was they came to the table and they asked for, how are we going to get better? That's astounding,
Mhm.
right? That the operational people kind of drove this part of continuous improvement in the risk area, risk as a team.
Yeah, you're not
Um,
wrong. Yeah.
that's cool.
So
That's cool.
let me ask you this, because there's a lot of ways to skin this risk assessment cat. So all right, don't send me a bunch of emails. I love cats. I love animals. It's just something folks from the country say, right?
Yeah,
No, we're not advocating on the risk matrix actually skinning cats. So
that's right.
let's put that in there.
Or
But
Norris Veriforce.
nor is Veriforce. Veriforce is anti-skinning of cats, as I am, and as is Dr. Martin, right? But if you go out there and you say, all right, let's do a search on risk assessments, you can find any number of noted authors. I'm personally very attuned to a book called Risk Assessments by Bruce Lyons and Georgie Popoff that's used in some collegiate academic studies, but there are others out there, right? There are other people that go about the risk matrix process and assigning numerology to this a lot of different ways. So how did you do it at TDW? Did you have a risk matrix that was standardized, or did you kind of customize the risk matrix that you utilized based on the risk category?
So what we did was, we're a services organization. We also have manufacturing plants and so forth, but um, what I work with mainly is services. So um, what we did was we wanted to talk the same language as our customers. If we have to interface with our customers, we wanted to make sure that we were classifying risk the same way. And so what we did was we followed the IOGP standard for risk. And so it helped us basically clarify what the different levels were and what the impacts were to our organization.
So begs the question. Um, you're using a system that, James kind of gave you a nod there when you said the IOGP, right? My question is how did you come about the right definitions for you all to be speaking the same language? Okay. If you use that as a base, how is safety now talking to quality and quality talking to operations? Is it a different, um, is it a TD Williamson different language that you speak, that you
It's a
all
trade
speak the same?
secret.
Yeah, is it a
No,
trade secret? Is it? Okay.
no, not at all. So um, I think where it crosses the line is that, we have the different categories and we had the different people. Like we didn't make up what was minor, serious, major, catastrophic for the other groups within our company, we allowed them to do that, right? So it wasn't like we were actually, you know, it wasn't our policy. It is our policy, basically, HSE policy, but it was more than that. It was more everybody coming to work together on the same page and understanding each other. Now we took like the 5x5, which is typical in the industry,
Mhm.
um, and we use the same terminology. We've used that for years and years and years. So we really didn't want to have to update all of our, numerous documents that we have with something that was totally different and retrain people with something that was totally different than what we already had or what already existed. So when I say that, we adopted the IOGP, it was the classification system, and it was basically a tool to help us get on the same page. We just said, hey, listen, we're going to go with this, and this is how we're going to do it. And then we trained our internal organizations to that. So that's how we did it.
Interesting. I have had the opportunity to speak with a lot of investment firms over the last 30 days, interested in the contractor validation space, right? And one thing that I think has revealed itself is the hidden risk below the contractor level, at the subcontractor level. Many times hiring clients have no idea who the subs are and what kind of programs they have, what kind of risk that they pose to the organization. I actually had an incident that resulted in the fatality of a subcontractor employee for one of my clients. And the hiring client didn't even know these folks were out there. They had no policies, no procedures, no training, no workers' compensation, no COI, no indemnity, no nothing that covers all those categories of risk, from health and safety compliance, legal, reputational, all these other risk categories that we talked about this morning. So my question is, it sounds like y'all have done a good job looking at risk to TDW and some of the categories we've talked about. Did y'all look at anything related to subcontractor risk? And if so, how are you managing that?
So in our services, we typically don't hire subcontractors.
That's the best way to manage it. Just don't hire them.
Yep.
There you go. Roll Tide,
So
Steve.
it's not a huge area for us, but we do have a subcontractor management program that if we did decide to hire someone, we'll bring them on, and we have a set of criteria that we use, and we have a policy and procedure, and they have to meet those in order to be one of our subcontractors.
Okay. I learned, old guy, back when I was younger, I had an old lawyer tell me one time, he said, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Right? And I just violated that. But in the standpoint of your experience, how much of a threat are subcontractors from a validation standpoint? Like, the contractor is on the hook with the hiring client.
What's the risk is what you're asking, James, right?
I'm asking how much of a risk is subcontractors to that contractor hiring client relationship?
Oof.
It just depends.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. So, I mean, we do a lot of stuff on pipelines, right? And so it has to do with span of control and with operator qualifications and stuff like that you don't mess around with, right? That has to be right.
Well, in my experience, is a contractor sometimes has a policy. Now, this is not, I know you've got a policy, but you really don't hire subcontractors. They'll have a policy because they're required to have one, but they really don't have a process, right? So I'd encourage people, as you're listening to this podcast, think about the internal risk you have, because you have a supply chain too. You're part of a supply chain to the hiring client. but you have a supply chain if you're using subcontractors, right? And you need
And
some
they're
type
using
of
other
way.
people and their materials and etc.
Absolutely. I've got a client right now that 90% of their business, Steve, is related to subcontractors. And we're finding out these people don't have any training. These folks are using day laborers in high risk activities, and they are a substantial risk. And the hiring client had no idea that these subs were in such of a
You bring up
disarray.
you bring up an interesting point when you talk about training. I would say that probably about 2018-ish timeframe, we decided that, because we work for a lot of different companies and they have different requirements for training and they manage their risk differently, we decided to standardize on what we do for training. So, for all of our US operations, we made sure that everyone had OSHA 10. We made sure that everybody had a Safe Land or a Basic Plus or whatever is relevant with that council that they deal with in that work area. We also updated our computer-based training and our onboarding systems. So I know we can go down a lot of different rabbit holes with all of the things that I just mentioned, right? But we standardized on all of that because we knew it was important in order to, meet the criteria of our customers, but also to make sure that we are trained and our workforce is trained, and that we're not putting people out there that could, potentially damage all the different things that we've talked about, our reputation, our products, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, being in pipeline helps because you have an OQ requirement. And so now I've used an acronym, and a lot of people may not be familiar with what OQ is. So Steve, would you briefly explain operator qualifications?
Operator qualifications are requirements to work on a pipeline, basically, and for different tasks. And the PHMSA, or PHMSA, another acronym, Pipeline Hazardous Materials, there's a list of all these different things that you can do on a pipeline or tasks that you can perform on a pipeline, and you have to actually show competency in doing those tasks in order to perform work on a pipeline. And then you have to have that OQ. So different customers have different OQ requirements depending upon their systems.
So if I was a crane operator or a welder, or even if I worked some type of gauging system or doing hot taps or whatever out on a pipeline, we don't just take your word for it that you're qualified to do it. You have to demonstrate those knowledge, skills, and abilities to an evaluator. And then typically, from my experience, Veriforce is one of the top, if not the top, OQ management firms in the world. You send that data to Veriforce to be held and to be verified that that particular employee has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do that. Man, if every job was like that, Steve, it'd make my life, Dr. Martin's life, and your life a lot easier. I wouldn't get things that say certifymenow.com. Forklift train.
Right.
So unfortunately, that hasn't gone down into the other aspects of occupational safety and health. But OQ is very structured. But for those contractors outside of OQ, where you're working maybe in construction, or you're working maybe in warehousing, or retail environments, or pharma, or whatever, where you don't have that structure, I think it's important that as a contractor, you have an arrangement for your subs to bridge their safety program to your safety requirements. I don't ever like to say, well, our requirement at XYZ company is this because XYZ hiring client says it has to be that way, right? I'm responsible for my employees. I may integrate that in my safety management system because I'm obligated contractually. But hey, here's the deal. If you're a sub working for us, you will have these types of policies and procedures. You will have this type of training. You will have this type of insurance. You will do these things, and we will verify these things because we want to reduce the risk in our supply chain. You agree with that?
I do. Yeah. In fact, you know, when SafeLand was rewritten or updated in 2021, the focus was on life-saving rules and reducing serious injury and fatality. And so we trained our people in 2022, our frontline workers, on life-saving rules, and we adopted those life-saving rules into our operational culture.
Now, Steve. See, we were talking about SIS, bro, before it was trendy to talk about SIS.
Yeah.
You know, since you brought this up, I'd like to get your viewpoint on this. How hard is it to find the S? The S, you know, everybody knows what fatality is, right? But when we start talking about we're going to reduce the serious injuries, we're going to reduce the serious injuries. What I found is if I talk to 10 different safety professionals, I get 10 different answers on what an S is. How can we reduce it if we can't define it?
Correct. Well, let me say that it depends on who you're reporting to. Right. I know that's not the answer that you want.
Look what you created. It depends culture. We all know church made up. It just depends.
Just depends.
It does.
And you know what? I'm convinced that if we in safety or any field for that matter, any company could wrap our heads around it just depends, right? And stop trying to jam company procedures, policies, programs, departments into one size fits all, especially when it comes to metrics. Okay, especially when it comes to metrics. If we could wrap our heads around just depends, we would solve all our problems. I believe it's true.
I think sometimes we create more problems with metrics than they help. First place when somebody asks me about a metric or a contract in supply chain, I might say, what are you going to do with it? Right. We all know challenges of underreporting because this is my name of our website, right? And SIS and that's related to SIS right now. There's things talking about PCS. And I don't know how we're ever going to get to a P. Because if you think S is convoluted, get it into P. Potential. Right. And we have great debates on that. And I think it really comes down. It just depends at the company level. At the company level. You know, we're trying to solve these problems with a magic bullet safety. And we've done it the last 30 years. A magic bullet that says, if we just do this one thing, everything else is going to fall in place. Safety's a lot more complex than that. So you know, when they ask what safety management system you're here to, it just depends. It depends on what works for your company, bro. I know what I like. You know, I'm a Conklin, Decker, Reason fan. But that may not work for you. I'm an ISO 45001 fan. But how does that work for a company that's got 25 employees? It just depends, right?
It depends. I just love hearing that from James.
The stuff I say, as people about people know me, I stole from somebody else. Just people. I just people. Like this one I tried to get in. Hers just depends. Mine has the best controls and planning to work. So
There's two. There's two.
And workers tend to be a final garnish. Their actions tend to be a final garnish to a legal improvement along with a cookie. That's a reason quote.
Sorry about that, Steve. We gotta get our little
There you go, right. But you can apply it. It sounds like that's what T.B. Williamson did. Hey, we're looking at hazards, okay, in occupational safety and health and in compliance. But we're also looking at hazards in financial risk, quality risk, and reputational risk. And from what I understand, you basically customize the 5x5 metrics, risk matrix that's typically used, rooted it back into the IOGP terminology and rolled it out through your company. And I want to applaud you for that. That's so proactive and cutting edge and something I don't typically see when I do assessments of contractors or assessments of my clients for that nature. Everything's still in the silo. If we do it, it's siloed inside quality. It's siloed inside safety. So I want to applaud you for that. Steve, as I'm kind of getting toward the end of our time with you, let me ask you this. You said T.B. Williamson is rooted in continuous improvement. So how do you continue with this risk evaluation as part of your continuous improvement plan, because risks change all the time?
That's a really good question.
For $499, you'll tell us the answer?
Yeah, exactly.
We need to write a book, right?
Right. No, we have really good people within the organization who look out for that, who are qualified professionals, who keep up to date with things, who, we get a lot of good feedback from customers, from supply chain, from all that kind of stuff. And we're proactive in the way that we utilize that, right? If it makes sense to us to do something to better improve, yeah, I mean, some things cost a lot, right? And it takes a lot of time to do it. It takes a lot of effort, and some things are low-hanging fruit, and you can just take care of it real quick and you move forward. But the thing that I like is in the 16 years that I've been here at my company, I love the progression, right? I don't think I'd still be here if I didn't love the progression. I didn't love how everybody was behind it, and we took step by step by step by step, right? It wasn't that it happened overnight, right? Like I said, we started actually really changing our organizational culture in 2016 that I remember, that I know of, when we brought in Conklin, and we did what we called safety culture leadership, and we brought in all of our senior leadership and all of our managers, our frontline managers for operations, and we trained them on all the stuff that we've talked about, so that we're getting on the same page. And that is part of our onboarding process currently, is that we run people through what does our safety culture look like, along with our SSE program and all that other stuff.
So it's been a journey.
It has been a journey. It's
going to continue to be a journey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great.
Somebody asked me yesterday advice you would give to safety professionals, because that journey you're talking about, you started many years ago to get to the point where you are. How do you avoid burnout? How do you avoid becoming frustrated because management priorities and safety priorities are not always the same? Steve, we don't have a problem, man. We want to pull everybody out of their day jobs, come in here and meet for 6 hours. That's a sales point. You got to develop that culture. So what I said to safety professionals, and I kind of want to wrap up and end on this and see if you got some advice, but my advice to safety professionals: celebrate the small wins. Celebrate.
I'm with James. I'm just going to interject here and say celebrate the small wins, and nothing happens overnight, right? So that's basically what I think James is talking about, is you just got to take it day by day. And you said 2016, we're 8 years later, and here you are, and it sounds like you're in a good place and you're going good direction, but none of that happens without a lot of hard work and a lot of pain, heartache, and back steps and stuff like that.
Right. Uh, I would say the most rewarding part of what I do is actually getting out to the front lines and talking with the people who do the work. That never gets old.
That's great. Steve,
Great.
thank you for coming on the Risk Matrix, baby. We've enjoyed the conversation. We hope to have you back. For those of you that come out and take time to listen to this podcast, we appreciate you. We love you. Tell your friends. You can show additional appreciation by smashing that like button, hitting subscribe. We're over there on YouTube at the Veriforce channel and on Spotify. Dr. Martin, take us out.
I just want to say, vote for James. Vote for James. Vote for James for ASSP Senior Vice President. You should have your ballot in your inbox now. And if you haven't done so, vote for James. I know he's probably kind of a little shame that I'm giving him shameless plug, but he really is the person to lead your society. And I just want to say thank you for listening to the Risk Matrix and dropping in every week with us on Tuesdays. And thank you, Steve.
Y'all keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs.